Welcome, artists. So what I want to give you is a breakdown on some really basic acrylic paint usage tips and tricks. So to start off, you will be receiving a tray of primary, red, yellow, blue, plus black, white paints to share at your table. Your other supplies, like your paintbrushes, will obviously be individual. Your mixing palette will be individual. You will also use some paper towels to dry your brush. And on the surface of your table should always be some kind of scrap paper to protect the surface of your table from getting acrylic paint on it. Additionally, you'll need a water cup to rinse your brush in. And usually, unless I say otherwise, you will be sharing this with a partner. So there would be 2 per table, since a table typically has 4 people. In order to use this shared paint without making a mess of it, you use your disposable palette here to transfer the colors that you need. So if you plan to be working with blue and white, for example, take a scoop. That means you put the bristles in the paint, take a glob off, and then notice I sort of twisted my brush off onto the paint palette. You don't need a ton. So I took 2 scoops. I might be able to do a whole lot of work with that before I go back. This leaves the table paint cup clean. There is no other colors in this blue. It's just blue. Now, before I get to my white, which I also need so that I can mix these paints, I have to wash my brush. So I put my brush in the water. I swirl it around. I can sort of make sure that the bristles hit the bottom or the sides, and I wipe it off on the edge before I go to wipe it on my paper towel. If I wipe it on my paper towel and it leaves blue, then it's not clean, but it just leaves water, so I'm good. Now I can take another scoop, twist it off sort of on my paint palette there in a separate spot. Never just automatically add it. You can't really control the mixture. Since I think I might be using a lot, I'll take another little dollop. I'm going to close that and put that clean white back to share in my table paint tray. Now, to mix these paints, you want to think about which one is lighter and then slowly add whichever one is darker or more intense to it so that you don't overwhelm yourself quickly. So if I'm going to make a pale blue, for example, start with my white in a new spot. So I still have my white to draw from here and add a little bit of blue to it. I can swirl those up. If I spread this super far and thin, it's going to dry up. So what you want to do is try to keep your mix in a contained little location. Otherwise, the more surface area it has, the more it's going to quickly dry out on you and be unusable. Once you have your light blue or whatever color paint it is you want to use, you have to think about the way that you apply it to a surface. So you might be applying it to a piece of clay. And if that is the case, go ahead and apply that. You'll notice when the paint runs out, you start to get a really fuzzy edge on your painting. That's called dry brush. If it's not on purpose though, it just looks like a mess. So when my paint runs out, my paintbrush is no longer covering evenly, I need to go back and pick up more paint. Otherwise, my paint will always look like that. Now you can obviously intentionally let your paint slightly run out each time to make a dry brush technique. So if you wanted to make your clouds look soft and fuzzy on the edges, you could use a brush with not enough paint on it to leave this dry brush sort of effect. No matter what texture you're painting, even if it's canvas, you want to make sure that you are using your paint in such a way that it fills in the spaces evenly and solidly. So especially when you're painting on canvas, it might seem like you have done a good enough job if you just kind of go like this, but you have not. You want to make sure you have an adequate amount of paint on your brush in order to fill in the spaces. And keep in mind your brush. A brush like this may not be well suited to a space like this. So use the appropriate size brush. If you have a small area, use a small brush. If you have a large area, on the other hand, Use a large brush. If I had to fill in a very large area with a tiny brush, it would take me a very long time. It would waste a lot of time, and that's not what we have class for, is to waste time. So, use your time wisely and choose the appropriate brush for the job. Every time you switch colors, you should be rinsing your brush to make sure that you don't make a mess of the colors that you have. Obviously, as you're working, any painty brushes should rest in the water cup so that they don't dry out and become challenging to clean up at cleanup time. Those are your basic tips on using acrylic paint. We can talk about cleanup in another video.